Welcome everyone, and thanks for joining. It's the second of the OT Security Connect community events. I'm excited to host today to discuss OT security transformation. The community is expanding, so today we've got guests from North America, from the UK and the UAE. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone. I'm the founder of the community and also a cybersecurity recruitment company called Quanta. My name's Eliot Davies, if you haven't met me. And these sessions are designed to enable some knowledge sharing, some collaboration across the OT security community. So I implore you, any feedback that you've got, if you find this community useful, share it with me directly. We'll keep improving the content and the sessions that we do in the future. And I'd like to start now by introducing the guests and our panelists today. So we've got, and I'd like to, if you guys can do like a quick, 1-2 minute introduction on yourself, just to explain a bit, I guess, a bit about your background. I think that will set the tone well. So co-hosting today with me is a digital identity guru, Michael Wu. Michael, if you could say a few words to say hello.
Hi all, my name is Michael Wu. I come from identity access management background, and I've been dabbling OT, IoT for a year or so now, and keen to learn lots from all our panelists today as well. On to Rob.
Hi, Rob Hayes, Managing Director at SEA Partners. My background is a hands-on OT, ICS, process control engineer. Got into cyber at the same time because the company I worked for was self-harming. I think I'll pick up on the self-harming bit later. I think that's quite relevant. And I've spent 27 years in OT cyber. Thank you.
Good stuff. Right, Jeremy?
Sure, Jeremy Wilkinson. I in North America, Texas specifically. I've been in technology for going on 30 years now. Did a lot of work for government work, both public and private sectors. I got into OT cybersecurity close to 15 years ago. Primary backgrounds in nuclear, a lot of nuclear consulting, nuclear cybersecurity, oil and gas, petrochemical manufacturing, just about every sector save maritime. So I've seen a lot of different environments, and so look forward to the discussion today.
Good stuff. And Connor?
Yeah, I'm Connor Seymour. I'm currently an OT security SME. Most of my career I've been on the boots on the ground, OT automation engineer, going from robotic programming and development, simulation work, PLC programming, automation and controls development, and all of the security functions that go around that. So that would be me.
Great. Thank you, everyone. Right. So before we start the discussion, just like to point out audience participation is encouraged throughout. So if you get any questions, drop them into the chat. Michael and I will pose them to the panel. And we'll just do that throughout the conversation. If we can't deal with all of the questions, then I'll apologize in advance. I don't know how many we're going to get, but we'll try to keep it, focused on the agenda and obviously relevant to the chat. So, but please do drop them in if you have anything that you'd like to know. So let's start by drawing a line under what we mean by OT security transformation. And Rob, I was hoping you could help us with that by putting a definition around that we can build the discussion on.
Yeah, sure. And I'll probably start with something controversial. I'm not a big fan of the word transformation. I think it's a word that sparks fear into industrial asset owners in terms of what you're exactly going to do to me, how are you going to disrupt my operations. It also suggests people have been doing it wrong in the past. I think I'd prefer to use the word evolution. I'm not sure it'll catch on, but I just wanted to bring up that nugget first.
I'll try to promote that for you. We'll see if we can get it going.
So an OT cybersecurity transformation for me, when I've worked on it in the past, is when organizations are generally at the beginning of their journey and they've identified a need and they're pondering that need, and it goes right from strategy through to implementation and hopefully the operating and maintaining of whatever systems, processes they put in place for that cybersecurity. So it's an all-encompassing journey of OT cyber, which is essentially made up of all the different components that we have in OT cyber, such as architecture, vulnerability scanning, not fully scanning, but vulnerability management, and all the different disciplines that go with it. It's an all-encompassing journey.
Perfect. So then, if you were beginning this journey, what fundamentals would you have in place to build from? So where would we go if we're right at the start of
that? Well, I'm probably going to jump to your second bullet. I think on the agenda, it's around the people. If you were to look at why most programs fail, it's around the people. You've got really diverse teams with diverse disciplines, geographies, cultures, agendas, and they all have different drivers. And I think if organizations spent the time bringing those disciplines together who are actually going to achieve this, get them sat down and get them on a common language, understand what each is going to do, understand the constraints of the different environments, that kind of thing. And I think if you spent time building that team, that culture, I think that would make a fundamental difference to most OT cybersecurity programs. I can give you an example. I was the lead architect and cyber architect on a digital oil field program, and this program went on for 8 years. And I think that program time could have been halved if we hadn't led with the solution and we just sat down with the different disciplines. Because it transpired at the end of the day, they all wanted it, but they all had different reservations and fears and what have you. And just spending that time, bringing that team together, I think we could have halved the duration of that program, or half the effort, for sure.
I think I agree with you there on solutionizing an environment. So say buying a product first and then trying to build your entire OT security estate around said product. Sit down with the appropriate people in each of the disciplines. So your automation team, your asset lifecycle management team, your vulnerability management team, etc., and say, what are your reservations with an OT security program? What would be your approach? Get these people together, get them talking the same sort of language, and say, here's a product that we think would be good. How would that fit into your current workflow? How would that fit into your current SOPs? Can your team support this or not? Because a lot of the time with Clarity, with the sheer volume of alerts that you sometimes get out of Clarity, a SOC can't handle that volume without adding extra OT security specialists in there, because IT security engineers are not geared to handle the type of alerts and issues and potential threats that come into an OT security environment a lot of the time.
Or recognize what they see when they see the alert. They don't have the background there, the depth of knowledge. And we've seen it multiple times across different sectors in my past where they have a solution, let's make this work, rather than we have a need, what best fits that need, what suits that, and based on our resources, how can we meet this need, rather than too many times to mention, we like the pitch for this product, let's get this product and force feed everybody on in the plants to accept this, and that never goes well, and it extends the time, Rob, like you said, it extends the time exponentially sometimes to actually implement it and operationalize it and see it successfully done.
Yeah, completely agree.
So we just had a note from John just in the chat, and so when we talk about OT, we're talking about operational technology. So I'm hoping that helps to kind of just define that just a bit more clearly. But yeah, so good starting point there, I guess, around sort of the people and the culture and some of the challenges that you're dealing with when you start on that evolution of OT security, which we'll go with, and so I guess you're going to be dealing with key cultural differences between OT and IT personnel that you've all sort of alluded to and touched on. How do you bridge that for really effective collaboration? I mean, what steps have you found really work to bring people together?
I'd say experience in each other's shoes. So with a lot of the OT security engineers, they've all come from a practical background. So we've all been on the ground, we've built these systems, we've experienced what it feels like when they go wrong. Like you've been hit with a robot, you've been electrocuted, you've been etc., etc., etc. This equipment is incredibly dangerous, and OT security is, in my opinion, and I know a lot of my colleagues share the same opinion, is about primarily protecting life, because if anything goes wrong, the best case scenario is that company loses money. The worst case is they lose life, and that is completely unacceptable. So what I would always suggest is the IT security engineers who want to go into OT security spend a day in the life of the guy who's on the other end of that machine's shoes and understand exactly what's going on.
Yeah, we're seeing a lot of as IT and OT start to collaborate more, we're seeing more of the IT teams visit the plants and actually see the manufacturing machines in motion, actually see the production lines, see the equipment firsthand, and just the sheer volume of some of these this heavy machinery moving at full capacity. You know, they really get a sense of what is going on in the plant. It's not just, you know, squares on an architectural diagram, or, you know, numbers on a spreadsheet. They better understand just the magnitude of these production lines, and then they get a sense of, okay, now I understand what's going on in this environment, and the importance of safety. You know, we've got to get these guys home with the same number of digits that they came to work with. And I think it's education on both sides. It's the OT guys better understanding where the IT guys are coming from, and vice versa, understanding you know, from an OT perspective, what their needs are and what their requirements are in keeping production going, maintaining the operation, and keeping money coming in to the company. That's the purpose. And I think sometimes IT loses sight of that. From an OT perspective, you know, their lives are screens and computers. They don't really understand that the business, the production lines, are what generate the revenue, and that's where the importance is.
And is there steps on the looking at it from the other perspective, where OT can step inside the world of the priorities of the IT team to be able to say, okay, well, how do we understand what your pressing issues are and what your challenges are, so that it's a two-way kind of collaboration then?
I certainly think so, and I think we're getting we're touching on that more and more as you see exploits in some of these plants. You know, we've started seeing ransomware. The gas pipeline in the U.S. that had, you know, was shut down because of ransomware. We're starting to see in the news, you know, wastewater plants get attacked, and so then they get a sense of, okay, these cyber attacks are real. This is actually starting to affect me now. These IT folks, you know, can explain what's going on and why security is now important as a result of not just maintaining production, but keeping these plants online and keeping these guys, you know, working.
So then what approaches can you take to upskill? You know, where do you kind of start with building the ability for those two kind of functions to really start to develop those skills? We talk about seeing the environments and seeing it for yourselves, but where do you take it from there?
So if I could just go back to your last question and also answer this question. The way I achieve that is by starting with a incident response and recovery exercise. And the way that would happen is that you get the operations folk into a room, only the operations folk, and you get them to map out the business process. That gives them reassurance that this is a business first approach, that security and what have you will just not be applied carte blanche to their OT environment. Then you bring in the technology people, sit down, look at the process, and you map that technology to that process. Then you bring in the security people and look at what security controls you've got mapped onto that technology estate. And also at present, you've got safety people, procurement, those kind of things. And it's the first time that these people have sat down, forget cyber. It's generally the first time these teams have sat down together and understood what they're doing for each other. Half the time, the IT people don't understand what the OT people are doing. The people who are generally managing the OT have some understanding of the operations process, but it's not complete. And by doing that, you start to change the culture of cyber, and they start to realize that cyber is actually out to defend the business rather than shut it down. Also, with doing that exercise, you start to move the risk needle. So you've got, all assets probably should have the ability to respond and recover. What varies is the speed that they need to recover. So if you could report back to the board that we've just gone and done, all our assets have the ability to respond and recover. These assets are much faster. These are on a back burner, a bit slow, but we still have that capability. It then starts to change the culture and gets board buy-in. So it's kind of a win-win-win exercise.
I agree completely with that. One of the things that we've started working on is OT has their own incident response plan. If something goes down in a plant, power failure, whatever, they've got their own plan already in place. And then IT has their cyber has their incident response plan. And you bring those two teams together. And Rob, I like your approach there. But those are two very different response plans. And every once in a while, they converge with a cyber event, and they're both forced to work with each other. But getting those two teams together, working hand in hand, you start to get a sense really quickly of what the other team does, what their responsibilities and what their priorities are. And so that really helps build that collaboration between the teams very quickly.
Good stuff. So what about operational constraints then? So we're going to talk maybe about some of the challenges that you'll face and the barriers that you'll face in being able to implement the ideas that you feel are necessary to build security around, these environments. So what operational constraints do you typically face, and how do you navigate them, whether they're personnel or budgets or, I guess, leadership approval? From your experiences, what do you see that are common, and how do you navigate through them?
From a leadership perspective and an OT asset perspective, I'm talking, when I say OT asset, I'm on about the building or the infrastructure, not just the OT devices. It's the disruption that they all worry about, because they will always say that production is king, manufacturing is king, and that even comes from the head offices. Manufacturing is king, production is king. So disrupting that is probably the greatest challenge. And I think following that is, well, who's going to pay for it in the end? Yes, you've got a nice big capital program now, which again they're probably going to get back charged for, but these assets are really on quite tight margins, and an increase in people and the OPEX cost for whatever security has been put in place really starts to hurt them. So I think you've got to be really mindful of the overhead you put onto that asset, because they will be back charged eventually, or have to foot the cost themselves. So I think those are the two major ones that I come across.
Similar experiences for you, Connor and Jeremy?
I think additional to Rob's point, I think one of the main constraints that I always find is the understanding of the functionality of any tools or plans that we want to put into place. So if we're trying to explain or get a point across to a non-technical individual, someone who has no experience with OT or IT cyber, and then they're relaying to a C-suite level or a director level, that translation can sometimes cause huge blockers, delays, etc., because of a simple change in wording. So like the change from the word query to scan. Huge implications and differences. Query, one device, and its native protocol, all happy. Scan, across an entire network, everything's getting hit, massive red flags, everything's going to go wrong, it's all going to go down, etc. Wording and the ability to handle, as Ali's put in the chat, your stakeholders and how they communicate is a huge thing. And just for a bit of background, Ali is the current OT cyber lead at BMI, program lead, sorry, and she is a perfect example of good stakeholder management. That program would not be anywhere near where it is currently if she wasn't there doing that level of communication. It is the hardest and one of the most essential parts of any sort of program, having effective and accurate communication, because the back and forth between different people in different organizations, because in some organizations you've got 30 different cyber teams, all handling little different pots and things. All of these then come under different organizations. You know, your CTOs, your COOs, your CISOs, etc. These teams are all trying to do the same thing, but they've all got different outcomes, different expected results. And then you have all this cross communication, you have all these cross pollinated problems essentially. And how are you meant to tackle that if there's not effective communication between those teams? And if it's being done by us, great, we're all technical individuals, we can talk. But then when it comes to relaying that information to the people who make the changes or the policy changes, etc., sometimes they don't understand that. And you have to be able to articulate yourself in their language, which means understanding the people and spending the time with them. And it is, Rob said earlier about the operations team and the cyber team, get them together. Same way, get everyone together, make them speak the same language, and then there will be no problems.
So Michael, did you have a hand up there? Is there? Sorry, you're on mute, Michael.
Sorry, we have a question for our participants, Jules Farrell. And just want to relay this to the panelists here. As Rob mentioned, you need support from various functions across the entire business to come together to solve this issue. How is a panel finding the challenge of identifying who is the ultimate owner of the risk within an organization and can bring these often disparate teams together and fund this exercise?
I'll start on that if that's okay. Hi, Jules. Long time no speak. It is difficult and it varies per organization. But I think rather than establishing a hardline governance early on, when people actually don't know what they're taking on board, is the wrong thing to do. I think, again, we're going to use the word evolve. You bring the teams together. You start to work out what's required. Does the CISO want to own it? Does the head of engineering want to own it? Does the head of manufacturing want to own it? Or whatever it is, head of production. And actually, what you come up more often than not is you get a hybrid model because not one person wants to own it entirely. And I think that's okay. I think, you know, the CISO can, as long as the head of OT security and the head of IT security have regular dialogue and understand each other's worlds, I think that can lead to a better outcome. But I think it's a soft start, evolve the teams and let people really understand what's involved in this discipline. And then you can start to see how the governance might pan out once you've got I'm going to inverted commas friendships in place.
I think establishing whatever use cases you're developing and what specifically, you know, the implementation of the project's for, and laying that groundwork beforehand rather than what we talked about at the beginning, solutioning with a product and force feeding this product into an environment. You know, I think that helps to establish that ownership right up front as well. So.
Perfect. Thank you, Jules, for that. Do you often find that obviously there are competing priorities between but in the security teams, right? So you've got competing priorities, productivity and security. You don't want to impact the productivity, whether it's manufacturing, the output of goods or the service that you're providing. How regularly does that cause difficult conversations for you, as you know, when you're primarily concerned with security? And how do you deal with that when the risk becomes too high but it's not been taken seriously?
I think I don't frame it as I'm doing security. If I can frame it to the operations people that I'm trying to help them protect their operations or recover their operations from cyber incidents and put the business element first, I think that creates a much better conversation. Because you know, they see cyber as I said earlier, something that's going to slow them down, hinder progress, hinder productivity. But if you then, and again, that's why the recovery, response and recovery piece really gets people on side, because they say, okay, this is absolutely focused on me getting back on my feet. I didn't know that these IT people did this. I didn't know that OT people did this. So I think constant framing of what your priority is, and the priority, no matter who you are in a manufacturing business, will always be the operations. It is safe operations. It'd be nice if it was safe and secure operations, but I think we're a few years shy of that. But I think it's heading that way, and it's converging towards safety as well.
Yeah.
Part of that transformation too that we're seeing happen, evolution, if you will, is sort of this industry 4.0. You know, we've operations have spent years isolating themselves from IT to protect the operations, to protect production lines of manufacturing, because let's face it, 99% of the time, if there's something happen, it happens in an IT system. There's, you know, through email or whatever. But now we're starting to see business leaders and IT sort of get hold of manufacturing and even vendors developing products that talk to the cloud. So we see this sort of merging together of IT, this convergence of IT and OT. And I think that puts a strain on engineers, operators who have spent years saying, well, you know, let's keep this let's keep this away as much as we can to isolate and protect what we've got, you know, but we want more efficient, we want you know, greater production, we want you know, data analysis and all of these things, and it's sort of forcing this convergence of IT and OT. I think that's a big part of that evolution that's going on, but we're really having to frame it, like Rob said, that we're doing this in a way that is going to help production. It's going to boost production while keeping it safe, while adding security, and but at the same time, you know, making sure that we tell the IT side, you know, they want all of this data, they want all of this information coming out so that they can you know, make production more efficient, but at the same time we've got to maintain that safety, we've got to maintain that production line and keep it going. So we're having to sort of pull OT along, and this can be a good thing and make it better, more secure, while at the same time pulling the reins on the IT side, saying, you know, you can't have everything all at once. So I think that's the natural part of this evolution that's taking place, and introducing things like, you know, the asset management, threat hunting in OT, and helping the the OT operators understand exactly why that's relevant nowadays. And then the vulnerability management that we talked about earlier, you know, that's key to maintaining these production lines. So I think that's part of the messaging for operators and engineers, that this has become part of their day-to-day vocabulary and what we're trying to work on and develop.
Michael.
Sorry, question for myself, gentlemen. Very much you have the change, of transformational piece. We very often, well, our first part is understand the needs of business, understand needs of stakeholders, and so forth, all these great things. But personally, I find that the end user, the individual, quite often gets overlooked. I mean, you've got a guy there that's been doing, you know, playing with SCADA or PLCs for God knows how many years, and all of a sudden they have this piece of technology thrust upon them. And I've seen projects fail with an OT IoT due to lack of training, lack of awareness. They've been given a tool, but they've not been shown how to use it. As part of a transformation process, how would you typically approach in developing training and delivering that piece of training? Is that something you do at the very, very beginning, you know, when you're doing a proof of concept or during rollout? And how do you support them going into BAU? You know, these are things that are floating around my mind. So wouldn't mind if you can answer that for me, please.
Yeah, when it comes to deploying, we'll pick deploying a product. And again, I'm going to use Clarity as my example because great example. When you approach a site and say, okay, we've been asked to deploy this product at your site. Here's what it can do for you. Here's what it's going to do. understanding that site's requirements, what they produce, how they produce it, who they are, sometimes even their backgrounds, can really help tailor training programs, training solutions to them. So within Xstone, for example, there's an entire training platform where they can go and learn and do this, that, and the other. A lot of the time, they haven't got time for that. They've got production constraints. They've got their own lives to run. They've got their own factory to run. They've got all these things. And now on top of all that, they've got an extra business requirement to say, you've got to complete all this training within a week because it's security essential, this, that, and the other. Whereas what you could do is sit down with them on an hour-long call, say, okay, here's what's probably going to be relevant to you. Here's how it affects you, and give them live examples with their assets, with their machines, with how it's going to work, with what kind of benefits they can see in their day-to-day lives. And developing a standard format for that can be tricky because, you know, different manufacturing businesses may have multiple different disciplines, etc. So say one produces roofing, one produces chimneys, one produces chemical solutions, etc. Each of them will have different requirements, different OT equipment, different types of people. Each of those needs their own bespoke training solution for that. And a lot of the time, you've got to spend a bit more time with them. You've got to work around their schedules and say, okay, you need a little bit more help there? Cool. Okay, I'm available here. You let me know when you're available. I will make myself available for you until you are comfortable with this tool. Because until they're comfortable, you do not have buy-in on that tool, which means it's not going to be worth it. It's not going to get used for the process that you wish. Because in a lot of the risk management side, your asset lifecycle management, etc., you've got this PLC sat there. It's 40 years old. This guy who's been here for the last 40 years is the one who put it in. He knows exactly how it works, all the faults, etc. He knows exactly what it controls, how it controls it, etc. An alert flags up saying there's been a configuration change, upload or download firmware, whatever you want to do. That then flags up in your SOC panic. There's been a big change inside the OT environment without, you know, notifying us, change control, this, that, and the other. Whereas if that guy could notify us in clarity, just put a little note on the alert when it comes to him. Here you go. This is what it is. Here's why we're doing it. All good. And that's because he's been trained. He's got buy-in on the tool. He's using it for his day-to-day operations. He's using it for his asset management. He's using it for his vulnerability tracking. If they're doing remediation and asset lifecycle management work, they're using it for the purpose it was put in for, because they have the buy-in, because they see the benefit, because they were trained bespoke to them. I think that's a really big part.
Yep, I would agree with that. And I think a lot of that's to do is kind of do with and not do to. I think sites do not like being done to. And one of the successful ways I've seen that is to use a large scale program, is to use a change management function to let people know things are coming down the track. This is the reason for change, etc. However, I don't think you can use a standard IT change management approach, because at the end of the day, the site, the asset needs to own that change. So I think you need a slightly tailored approach to make sure that sites feel in control with what's happening with them, and that's really fundamental.
Go for it, Michael.
Sorry, thank you very much, gentlemen, for that. I'm sure everyone has got a lot of takeaways from your answers there. We have another question from our attendees. So, Ali, what would you say the critical path or success factor for initiating and embedding an IT/OT BAU support where there is a dependency on OT folks taking on IT responsibilities?
That's tricky. That's going to take some time and some nurturing along the lines of what Connor was just explaining, because typically an IT solution, when it's implemented, they're designed to not, most of them run in the background. Certainly the security, the cyber IT applications and solutions, they run uninterrupted. They don't interfere with the IT folks day-to-day lives. OT security solutions, however, require interaction. They require some attention from the operators because of the nature of the environment. And so they're designed entirely differently. I think it really helps to know exactly the what the use case is, to have that built out and documented. This is what we're looking for. This is the purpose that we're trying to achieve, and not thrusting that on the operators, the plants, rather than going to them initially and saying, here's what we want to implement, here's how it will benefit you, here's the ask ultimately, and then working with them to implement that along the way. I think at that point you get, you know, the 2 points converge, and you get collaboration between the team, rather than we have a solution, we're putting it in, here's what we need from you, let us know if you have any questions, see you. That never goes well, but we see that all too often, unfortunately. That's just that's not a path to success at all, and we've seen it time and again. So I think the collaboration is key very early on in working with the operators, and letting them know this is the benefit to you, to your site, to your production.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Jeremy. I've got one more question here from Adam Dawson. He agrees with points with attack surface growing. Question is, do you see a trend towards equipment becoming capable of operating in a zero trust environment? Is the main barrier the CapEx resistance to replacing hardware that can operate in this way?
Yeah, I'll start with that. I do see a trend towards zero trust. I think it's still immature from an OT perspective, but there are vendors out there who are putting solutions out there, and I know that some people have a really allergic reaction to the word zero trust, but I think if you take it from a principle basis, I think some of those principles are actually quite useful. I think you start to get to the point of IT-OT convergence very quickly. I think you start to get to the point of remote access very quickly, rather than difficult infrastructure solutions. So I think there's some real benefits. I see the trend heading there. And I've also seen solutions that can go in that can work with legacy equipment. So I think, but I think it's, I think it's something that needs to be considered at the start of your evolution, because I think having a hybrid environment and changing tack partway through might be quite confusing. So I think if you're going to consider it very early on in your life cycle. CapEx is a major problem in terms of having to upgrade kit. Absolutely. I was in a shipping terminal not long back, and they had some very large cranes which were running an outdated version of Windows, and the vendor wanted upwards of $300,000 per Windows box to bring it up to date. And when I say up to date, I'm not meaning actually the latest, just the latest version of Windows. I'm on about one that they are currently supporting, that's in support. So it's huge cost, because a lot, yes, there's a lot of this kit out there, but vendors use that to be able to take that and put that kind of cost in place so that they can use it to develop their product onto that platform. It doesn't already exist, so that they're asking you to pay for their R&D costs. So yeah, CapEx is a huge consideration.
Yeah, I agree 100% with. I've had similar discussions regarding that. I think the trend is most certainly going in that direction because of IT-OT convergence. I think it's probably a truly successful implementation, probably 5-ish, 10 years, maybe too far, but at least a good 5 years away, because the technology is still immature. We're developing that, but I think some of the features that are being built into these are still vulnerable because of the immaturity. And so we haven't seen successful implementations. It's still in that painful growth stage as a result. But certainly that's the trend, that's the path going forward.
I think the stopping point and the mid ground at the minute is secure remote access and PAM solutions around your OT environment. So you've got your, I don't know, to use a Yambacker engine, for example. All around the UK, there are Yambacker engines, which are maritime ship engines that are put on brownstone sites. These engines are 25, 30 years old. The control systems on them are BNR 2005 CPUs. To get an upgrade on each of those engines, bearing in mind you can buy a brand new one for 200,000, is 250,000 pounds to replace the whole control system, including all the little fun bits. The solution to giving remote access to that engine securely is you have to use another 2 PLCs to interface with that, going through the different protocols, and then have an OT firewall with your secure remote access solution on the back end. Now, all of that's managed, but the engine's still vulnerable because it's still 30, 40 years old, and it still has all of these problems. So mitigating the risk currently, and then 5, 10 years down the line, hopefully there will be a solution which can do it natively.
So that leads very nicely on to what my next question. So you have a lot of legacy solutions out there that are out of support by the vendors and manufacturers, so forth. They're riddled full of holes. There's a massive attack surface. There's a massive CapEx investment to bring them up to date. IT are trying to come along with their cybersecurity umbrellas, and basically I've seen OT being resistant. I mean, at what level do you, the appetite for risk is so high that, you know, and they keep on accepting the risk. How do you convince your customers saying, look, the risks are so high, you have to do a transformation project, you have to open the IT shield umbrella? How do you get over that challenge? Because I personally found that very challenging in the past.
Live examples I find are the best. So it's usually when something goes wrong that companies react. Because there was an example. I don't know. Am I allowed to talk about the incident at BMI? I don't know. Jeremy?
Yeah. Don't name names.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so there was an incident at a company that both Jeremy and I worked at, and BMI Group, if you hadn't guessed, which had an old Avaya phone system. Now, the NTP server for that was based out of Russia. And when the Ukraine-Russia war kicked off, the NTP server then turned into a malicious NTP server with a Trojan data grab. We had an issue where this Avaya phone system, there are no Avaya phones in the building. It was just a rack sat in the server room that had been left connected. So legacy hardware. Now that then sparked, we captured the malicious communication. They set up I think it was an ICMP tunnel successfully once, and we had to isolate the entire site, isolate it from the WAN. That site then shut down, and I had to go on site and inspect every single control system on that site. Now, all of those control systems weren't centrally managed, so they weren't connected to the wider network. However, walking around the site, you find I found a cable ran from the office, patched in through an RS11, RS45, RJ45 to RS485 connection to a PLC because someone didn't want to walk down, and that cable had just been left there. And then you walk around, and you've got 4G routers in every cabinet connected directly to the control system with no control measures. Yeah. And through that, we set up an entire company-wide policy about those 4G routers because it gave direct access in. Almost 200 sites, no 4G routers, all of them removed almost immediately because there was a risk, and it happened. We have physical evidence this happens, and that site lost ungodly amounts of money. And all the people who were on that site, they're still getting paid, so they're still expending income. They're still expending their operational budgets. So, long story short, physical examples are best. If you can show them an example and walk it through and show them what happens to their machinery. So if you can, I don't know, maybe get a physical device and show them what happens when you query it with the wrong protocol, or if you hit it with a bit of malware.
Yeah.
A lot of OT people are physical learners. They see, they do. They've learned by doing it in the factory, so they will learn with examples.
But by the time you learn from the mistake and you're reactive to it, it's already too late. You're compromised. You know, they always say prevention is the best cure.
It is.
How do you go about changing the attitudes of people? Let's say, I've done it the same way for the last 10, 20, 30 years, and why should I change my ways? Well, we're trying to prevent, well, this has so far never been compromised. Well, never say never. No, that's attitudes that I've come across. You know, how do you change a person's attitude that is just resistant to change? For any transformation, I think that's the biggest hurdle.
So I encounter one of two types of personalities typically who are actually decision makers. So ones that you can convey the risk, show them the headlines of what's going on, and put it in business terms. This is the consequence if this exploit is taken advantage of, if this vulnerability is actually exploited. They recognize it and they actually take action. The other ones are the ones with their fingers in their ears, you know, la 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 la. Like you said, hasn't happened, so we're just going to keep going. It's you can, the old adage, you can take a horse to water, but you can't make him drink. So you can give the decision makers all the information, and it's still up to them. But our part is just giving them that information. That's the best we can do, unfortunately. In my experience, you know, I encounter too frequently the ones that, you know, have their ears plugged and don't want to hear anything. But I think the trend is you know, the pendulum swinging in the other direction because of the sheer number of headlines. Constantly, we're inundated with stories of these exploits happening. They're really starting to come around. I'm starting to see in a lot of sectors a real focus on OT security that I haven't encountered in years past. Money getting thrown at the environments. Hey, we want to secure these. We want to see the assets. We want to, you know, be able to track the vulnerabilities. We want to do some intrusion detection in these environments and these types of things. So I think the attitude has really taken a good swing in our direction that's helped that. And nobody wants to be the first, nobody wants to be the last. So now that attitude has started to shift, I think it's easier to have that conversation and get the decision makers to actually put out the money in order to get these environments secured.
Well, I'd hope that it comes as good news to everybody on the call that's, you know, that's dealing with these environments and whose job it is to secure it, because you're looking at what investment on the way, what support is on the way, you know, and actually if there's a, you know, if there's an industry-wide, you know, focus on securing this now, then actually, you know, it might make everyone's lives easier. I think, and just looking at time, we've obviously got 9 minutes before we're going to wrap up. I thought it'd be good to end on a piece of advice. If you guys can share any nuggets of wisdom, easier said than done, because I know it's a complex conversation. But if there's one piece of advice you could give to someone that's starting on an evolution or transformation, whatever you want to call it, where would you start? What one piece of advice would you give someone to get off on the right foot?
Okay, moving beyond the people aspects, which I think that people thread has continued through this whole conversation. Everything has gone back to people. No matter what we've talked about, it's gone back to the challenges with people. For me, it's stop observing the problem. Yeah, many programs fail because they spend an inordinate amount of money, 6 months, and they're doing asset inventory and risk assessment. Useful things, but not actually moving the risk needle. Go and do something that moves the risk needle, so you can report back to them. Well, hey, listen, within this amount of time, we've now all our OT assets, we can now respond and recover to an incident. Great, that's something they understand. They don't understand a $5 million asset inventory or a £5 million asset inventory or a £5 million risk assessment. Yeah, we know there's risks. That's why we asked you to go and do something about it. Yeah, stop observing the problem. And then I think the next piece is don't try and do everything everywhere all at once. And I'm going to go back to that word, evolve. Get your incident response and recovery plans in place. Great, get all those Now now you've got a picture of, and that incident response recovery plan can start to help you with what's further required in resilience. So really, iterations where you're consistently moving the risk needle. Just don't try and do everything everywhere.
Very good. Thank you, Rob. And what about you, Jeremy? Where would you point them?
I would point them probably the very first thing, top of my list would be developing, when we touched on it earlier, an incident response plan that unifies both the operations teams and the cyber teams to be able to work together. I think there's tremendous widespread benefit to that. Most environments that I've encountered don't have an OT specific incident response plan. The guys on site know what to do if there's mechanical failure, things like that. But because we're seeing these lines blurred in these environments where we've got more devices talking to the cloud, those perimeters no longer, those hard perimeters no longer really exist. We've got to be able to get that resilience level up and develop a specific for OT incident response plan where these two teams work together and can legitimately get operations back online quickly and safely.
Fantastic. And Connor, how about you?
I'd probably say see what's out there already. So a lot of the time I find myself reinventing the wheel, and there's already this documentation around this device, this type of procedure in place. If you don't know what's already out there, how can you build upon it or integrate it with anything? Rather than writing your thing and then expecting other people to come and read it and integrate it with their documentation and integrate it with their processes, etc. Go to the people and say, look, here's what we're trying to do. Would you be able to work with us for this? And again, as Rob said, main theme in this whole thing is people. It's just go out and find the information. Try and initiate those conversations initially and get them moving, because if you're going to sit there for 6 months doing all this documentation and then you realize, oh, that doesn't fit with any of the procedures for this business, it doesn't fit with any of the standards we have, you're going to redo it all. You've wasted 6 months. The program is now at a standstill and a failure, and you've just wasted probably somewhere close to 5 million quid. You need to do your legwork.
Perfect. So thank you, everyone. We're going to wrap up. I know there's another question here from Ali. Let's see if we can do a quick a quick run through this, right? And then we'll move on to closing. So what awareness and education is required for CISOs and CIOs to wrap OT into their expertise so they can help drive and supply OT security initiatives better?
Let me very quickly. GICSP does not make you an OT cybersecurity person, okay? So you need to go down to the site and immerse yourself in the asset, see how it operates, see what goes wrong, see the pressures that these people are under. You have to go and do that. That's the biggest thing. You can't do it from an office. You have to go and be in that place. To be an OT cybersecurity, you need to go and be on that site. I've got experience on sites, so that's fundamental.
A lot of time spent with the boots on the ground. I am starting to see CISOs and even CEOs. I listened to a CEO who used to be an automation engineer, 20 years prior to his business degree, landing him in the top seat. But as far as education goes, yeah, it's spending time in the plants, talking with the operators, the asset owners, and understanding what it is they do, how they do it, and why they have the priorities that they have. That's going to be key.
Love that.
I think as well with this CISO's wider team, because a lot of the time they don't push things directly, they have subordinates who they push teams, etc. I think the heads of each of those departments also needs to understand exactly what they're talking about. Because I was saying earlier with translation between, because if you've got an incredibly OT proficient and technical knowledge, and he says, right, I need this, and this done, and then you've got underneath him the guy who's pushing it, or woman or person who's pushing it forward, they don't understand that. They will completely miss the whole point, miss the translation, and then everyone underneath will not understand what the hell is going on.
Magic. Right. Really good stuff. Then thank you. So it's going to bring us to the end of the webinar. A massive thanks to Michael, Rob, Connor, and Jeremy. Thanks for taking the time to share all of your experiences and take the time out of the day. And obviously to all of the people that have logged in and joined as guests today. Thanks for the questions and the engagement. I think it was a really good collaborative session, and I hope that you've taken away some insights and some knowledge and some advice there that's useful and valuable to you. Feel free to reach out to any of us in the future. You know, the community is about networking and collaboration and learning opportunities. So, you know, make connections, don't be shy. You know, this is about building a community of OT security people. So I will be sharing on LinkedIn and YouTube as well the recording of this session. I'll create some shorter clips as well for LinkedIn. Only one quick favor from me is just to ask, if you see it, like it, share it. You know, it helps with the engagement, it promotes the group, and I think it will help the community to grow. So thank you again for all joining. Enjoy the rest of your day, and hopefully speak to you soon.
Thanks, Eliot. Cheers.
Cheers, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
everyone.
Have a great day. Bye-bye.